Let's talk about some trades for the first overall pick. Welcome back, everyone, to Utility Sports. Extremely excited to talk about one of the bigger questions heading into the 2024 NBA draft. We're in the week of the draft. I'm extremely excited. I hope you guys are as well. And we still don't know who will have the first overall pick because there's a lot of rumors right now saying Atlanta might trade the selection, which is very rare in the NBA to see a team willing to move out of the top spot because of how strong usually the number one pick is in NBA draft classes. This year, though, there's a big question. Who is the first overall pick? Who warrants that first overall selection? Is there a specific player in this year's draft that deserves that top spot in the draft? And obviously Alex Sarr, who you see featured on the graphic, is at the center of that discussion right now. But it seems like Atlanta might have cooled off from Alex Sarr being the pick number one. There are rumors around Donovan Clingan. There are rumors around Zachary Shai. Could Atlanta look in a different direction than Alex Sarr? And if so, are there teams willing to jump up to the number one spot? That's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. So let's jump forward now into our video preview as we look at 4 potential trades for the first overall pick. I have 4 different teams vying for that number one spot here via trade with the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the big questions here are which teams are able or willing or both to move up. Now, there's some teams that are loaded with draft assets, a team like Utah, for example, but I don't know if Utah is really motivated to move up to the number one pick in this year's draft. So what teams could potentially look to do so? Which teams have the ammo or the current draft slot to be willing to jump up and to be able to jump up to that number one pick? What would potential returns look like for the Atlanta Hawks? Again, 4 mock trades for the first overall pick. And I want you guys to comment down below. This is a question I really want to hear your answer. Would you trade the pick or would you keep the pick? I want you to comment down below right now. In quotes, I think Atlanta should, and then either trade the pick or keep the pick. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. If you were in Landry Field's shoes, if you were running the Atlanta Hawks right now, what would you do? Would you trade the pick? Would you keep the pick? Who would you draft if you keep the pick? I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are heading into the week of the NBA draft. Now let's get into it here with trade number 1, and it is a deal between the Atlanta Hawks and the Houston Rockets, who have the 3rd overall pick on draft night currently. That 3rd overall selection would go a long way in moving the needle for a trade here for Atlanta. I think one of the big things, and something you'll see in these trades here today in this video, I don't know if Atlanta's going to want to jump a long way down outside of the top 4 or 5 picks in this year's draft. So if you're moving up to the top spot, you have to probably be within striking distance already. Houston is in striking distance, and one of the big positives here about the Rockets already having the 3rd overall pick, Atlanta, who has Washington right behind them, probably feels pretty comfortable with the idea that Donovan Clingan would be their 3rd overall if that's who they decide to land on. Also, Zachary Shai could be in play there, where maybe Shai is available if Donovan Clingan is not. So if you're Atlanta, the 2 guys you're probably targeting between right now, anyway for the top pick, according to all the reports and rumors, one of those 2 guys is likely to be there for you 3rd overall if you do trade down. You also pick up an extra first-round pick in 2025. It's that Nets unprotected pick with a swap right there for Houston. So if the Nets bottom out, if the Nets decide to sell off any of their pieces, if the Nets just have another bad season, you're looking at a very likely top 10 or at least lottery level pick there with that selection. So Atlanta, yes, you do move down a couple of spots, but if you're not planning on taking Alex Sarr and you get confirmation from Houston that they would take him if they move up, then you really walk away in a direction where you add an extra asset. You probably still walk away with the guy you would have drafted anyway, whether that is Donovan Clingan or Zachary Shai. And for Houston, why does this make sense? Now, I've been a long-time proponent of picking Reed Sheppard 3rd overall from Houston. One thing I will say here, though, if there's a power forward out there that would make some sense alongside Alperen Şengün, it is someone with the skill set, the frame, the body type of an Alex Sarr, someone who is lengthy, tall, 7'1" with shoes on, mobile, athletic, and can also shoot the ball a bit. Now, Sarr's not an NBA-ready three-point shooter. He's not going to step in day one of his career and shoot 35-36% from 3. but there is a real semblance of a jump shot there. He has a lot of finesse, a lot of touch, has a nice floater he likes to get to, has a pull-up jump shot that he is capable of making and knocking down. And then defensively, he's mobile enough to guard perimeter players. In fact, some of his best success over in the NBL was moving his feet laterally out in space with guards and wings. So how does he look to translate to the NBA? He looks to translate as a very versatile defender, someone who can provide rim protection. I think that's one thing Houston is still missing to their defense holistically, is just that backline rim protection, that backline kind of rim deterrence, and that's exactly what Alex Sarr can give you, while also still simultaneously fitting in offensively around Alperen Şengün because of his finesse style of play. His skill set, I think, would be a very clean, easy fit alongside Şengün. Now, it's going to take a little bit of work. It's not like day one I'm saying they're going to be the best duo ever and the easiest front court to put together, but they're going to be able to coexist together long term, is my opinion on that. So if Houston did feel like they were overwhelmed with Sarr's talent and really impressed with him overall, jumping up to that first overall pick could very well be warranted for the Rockets. And yes, it does cost you that 2025 Nets pick essentially, but it's something I think the Houston Rockets could walk away with being relatively happy with the end result. Now moving on to trade number 2, it is a trade with the San Antonio Spurs. And the Spurs, right again in that top 4 overall picks in this year's draft, but they are 1 pick lower than Houston, which means there's a little bit more risk here for Atlanta if they move down with San Antonio. Not only because obviously Washington's going to pick someone at 2, but then Houston could theoretically draft your guy at 3. So let's say Sarr goes first overall, maybe Risa Shea goes 2 to Washington, then maybe 3rd overall, Houston shocks everybody. Instead of taking Reed Shepherd, maybe they go with Donovan Clingan. And even though some Rockets fans wouldn't like that and some people would be really surprised, that is a possibility still at this point, and Atlanta wouldn't have confirmation on that until they got to pick number 4 anyway. So there would be a huge risk here for Atlanta if they do trade down to 4, maybe not getting one of their 2 guys that they seemingly at this point of the process really do like at the top spot. So trading down to 4 does come with a little bit more risk, which means you get a little bit better asset haul here. You get an extra 2nd round pick, number 35 in this year's draft. Could project to be a valuable asset for Atlanta if they hit on that pick in this year's 2nd round, and they get their own 1st round pick back next year, and that's an extremely valuable asset. Not only does it allow Atlanta to maybe reshape their roster quickly this offseason, if you have a DeJounte Murray trade lined up, if you have a Clint Capella trade lined up, a DeAndre Hunter trade, Atlanta would be less fearful of completely bottoming out for one season. Maybe that would allow them to position themselves for the 2025 draft with a lot of really good talent. The Hawks could take a little bit of a longer-term approach this offseason, and with Trae Young, it's not like you're going to completely bottom out forever, but maybe the Hawks use this next year as a reset year, try and refigure out their roster, reconfigure everything around some young talent and Trae Young. This would kind of lessen that blow, lessen that kind of difficulty of doing that type of decision, because maybe instead of sending a top pick to San Antonio, you're keeping that top pick yourself after making this trade. And for the Spurs, why is this genius? I just talked about Alex Sarr and his potential theoretical fit around Alperen Şengün. Now let's supersize that and make it even freakier, even crazier defensively, playing him alongside Victor Wembanyama. The Spurs walk away with their twin towers in the front court. If you look at the success of the Minnesota Timberwolves this season, size matters. That's the age-old question, isn't it? Size really is important. And the reason for San Antonio especially that they could look at Minnesota and be very optimistic about this long-term outlook, Minnesota has 2 flawed big men. Karl Anthony Towns, one of the worst defensive centers in the league back when he was still playing center, and at power forward, he's not really mobile enough, quick enough to actually truly guard wings either. That was a kind of difficult picking point for the Wolves this year, especially in certain matchups that tested that. Sacramento, New Orleans, those were problem matchups for them throughout the year because of the speed those teams play with. And it put Karl Anthony Towns in spots to really have to work in ways that he's never had to before defensively. Now, Cat, I think, did adjust well to his new position, and obviously Minnesota found a ton of success. And then on the offensive end, Rudy Gobert is one of the lesser talented Hall of Famers ever when it's all said and done from an offensive standpoint. Now, he positions his body really well. He does a lot of little things very, very well on offense, but the reality is he's not the most skilled player in the league, right? He at times struggles to catch the ball, especially passes below his waist. He doesn't have the most touch. He's pretty flawed and limited offensively from his own creation ability. Now, I know in the playoffs he's hitting step-back fadeaways over Nikola Jokic in Game 7 of the NBA to get to the conference finals. That was crazy. But for the Spurs, you walk away with two big men who are extremely talented offensively and both of them extremely versatile defensively. Sorry, I've already talked about his ability to switch out on the perimeter, guard out in space, protect the rim as a weak side guy. Pairing that with Victor Wembanyama would be terrifying for other teams. I really do think if a team trades up for the first overall pick in this year's draft, it should be the San Antonio Spurs. They have pick 8 as a buffer as well. You can take this gamble on Alex Sarr. You can really afford to send this type of asset collection out because the Spurs have a lot of future draft picks already in a draft where Atlanta probably would be receptive to taking offers and potentially trading down. If you give them a strong offer, something like this, maybe a little bit more in there to convince Atlanta to ultimately take your call and accept your offer, walking away with Alex Sarr as your long-term front court pairing with Victor Wembanyama could be terrifying in a vacuum. The two French centers together could be a tremendous pairing, a lot of touch, a lot of playmaking feel, a lot of overall finesse, finishing, length, size, athleticism, flexibility, versatility, fluidity defensively. Whatever word, whatever adjective you want to describe them, they're all good ones, okay? And I think the Spurs would be really, really scary. And Atlanta still might get their guy at pick 4. They pick up an extra first rounder next year, their own back, which could be very, very valuable, and pick number 35 as well. I think it's a pretty strong asset haul for Atlanta to still ultimately probably land the guy they want anyway. And the Spurs go and create one of the scariest front courts in recent memory. Then our next trade, and it's with the Washington Wizards, the third one here on the docket. And this is one that I know some Hawks fans are going to say, well, we're barely getting anything in return for this. That's because there's also no risk here in making this type of trade. And we saw the Wizards last year make this type of trade as well. They moved up from pick number 8 last year with the Indiana Pacers to jump up to pick number 7. They traded up one spot. It cost them a couple of second-round picks, but it guaranteed them Bilal Coulibaly. Remember, at that time, the Pacers were rumored to be listening to offers, entertaining some trade-down calls. Ultimately, Washington incentivized Indiana enough to say, look, please don't trade this to another team. Instead, trade with us. We get our guy. You guys still get your guy, and you get a couple of second-rounders on top of it. That's this exact type of trade. I know, yes, pick 7 and pick 8 are different than pick number 1 and pick number 2, but in a vacuum, it's still the same philosophy here. Washington calls Atlanta and says, look, we hear you're not sold on Alex Sarr. He might fall to us at pick number 2 anyway. Please don't trade the first overall pick to another team that wants Alex Sarr. We want Alex Sarr. We'll give you a couple of extra second rounders. We have plenty to work with. I think the Wizards have 12 second rounders over the next 7 drafts. They can afford to part with 2 of them here to jump up one spot, guarantee that they get their guy with Alex Sarr. And the Hawks, again, you walk away with one of the 2 players you're probably targeting at 1, whether that be Zachary Rissache or Donovan Clingan. You're getting a couple of extra second-round picks. And there's also another little small component in this that actually does benefit Atlanta. You save a little bit of money going from the number 1 pick down to the number 2 pick. And while that doesn't seem like a big deal, and to me it's not the biggest factor in this decision at all, it is an added benefit to the Atlanta Hawks too. So I think this type of deal, even though it doesn't look super crazy, it's just moving down one spot for a couple of extra second round picks, the Hawks still get their guy that they would have taken number 1 if it's not Alex Sarr. The Wizards get Alex Sarr in the building. They get to guarantee he is a Washington Wizard. I love his fit long-term with Washington. I really like the way the Wizards are building their franchise, their direction going forward. Guaranteeing you get Alex Sarr if that's the player you want, I think is a tremendous idea for them. And for Atlanta, this still makes a good deal of sense because you walk away with the prospect you want. You do business with another Eastern Conference team. You're building some of those relationships with other executives in your conference. I think that's a real positive too in this as well. I think just Atlanta guaranteeing they still get the guy they want, the guy that they've been looking to evaluate first overall, whether that's Rissache or Clingan. Either of them could be tremendous fits, in my opinion, with the Atlanta Hawks long term, and you pick up a couple of extra 2s in the process. I think it's a win-win for both sides. Now let's talk about a crazy trade, and it's with a team that is picking outside the top 10. This is the only team in a position really to be able to afford to take this kind of gamble, this kind of risk. I talked about how I didn't see Utah being willing to do that quite yet at this point of their rebuild and how many assets that they have. I do think a team that maybe would be willing to step on the gas a little bit is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They already made a win now trade, making a big move, sending out Josh Giddey for Alex Caruso earlier this week. Well, now guess what? They still have one of their biggest flaws to address, and that is the power forward spot. I talked at length already in this video about how Alex Sarr would really complement Victor Wembanyama and form a unique, athletic, defensive-oriented front court with a lot of offensive upside and a lot of offensive talent. Well, guess what? OKC, you have that type of blueprint here in front of you as well. You trade up to get Alex Sarr. You already have his brother Olivier Sarr. You bring the Sarrs to Oklahoma City, okay? And you put them next to Chet Holmgren. This gives you more length in the front court. It still allows you to play your 5-out style. Sarr's capable of pushing the ball up in transition, handling the rock a little bit. Again, he has that perimeter-oriented game where he's able to dribble, pass, and shoot a bit. Now, there's still skills that he needs to grow upon. They're not developed to the point where he's going to be an all-star level player or anything like that quite yet. But the upside's there for him to grow into that type of player. And if OKC is in a spot with all of their draft picks, all of the things that they have to offer, without having to give up picks to get Alex Caruso, I could see them willingly saying, look, we can afford to gamble on a couple of these picks to move up for this specific prospect. It's typically almost impossible to move up to the number 1 spot, especially outside of the top 10. This year might be the rare opportunity for OKC to kind of abandon that and to take advantage of this situation. They trade pick number 12. They trade a 2025 first that is either via Houston or the Los Angeles Clippers. They trade that 2027 Clippers first, which is extremely valuable, unprotected there. That's an extremely valuable asset for Atlanta to land in this, which is why you can justify moving down 11 spots in this year's draft. You also get 2 second-rounders if you're the Hawks. So 3 first-round picks, one of them being in this draft at pick number 12. 2 second-rounders. This is extreme value. It's a big-time payday for the Hawks to move out of the number 1 spot. The Thunder go up and get a guy that I think would fit really well next to Chet Holmgren, fit really well into their offensive system, helping their defense still, which is already projecting to be really, really great with all the defensive playmakers, event creators that they have on that end of the floor. I think Alex Sarr would fit smoothly into that as well. Give them a rim protector for when Chet Holmgren's off the floor. It does cost you 3 first-round picks, but I think it makes sense. And for Atlanta, I think this would be a really good way to kind of re-add stuff into your cupboards. You traded so many things for DeJounte Murray. This is how you restock your cupboards a little bit. Trading out of the number 1 pick, which remember, the Hawks were projected to have the 10th pick on draft night before the lottery. So you're almost back to where you were expected to be picking, but now you walk out of it with extra first-round capital, extra second-round capital, and you still walk away in this draft with someone like Ron Holland, maybe Cody Williams. Who knows who's going to be there at pick 12 at this point in time, but you're walking away with probably a quality wing still, someone who has a lot of upside, whether it's one of those 2 guys on the graphic or not, and extra first-round capital, extra second-round capital. I like this for Atlanta. It's a big-time pay price here for the Thunder, but one that I could definitely see them justifying because of the opportunity to pair someone like Sarr with Chet Holmgren in their front court. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content as well. Really appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you enjoyed this video talking about trades for the first overall pick. It was a lot of fun to record, and we'll catch you in the very next utility sports video.